Hello everybody, thank you for joining me in this live webinar. First of all, greetings from Rome. It seems a little bit strange to talk about the hard and soft tissue regeneration in front of a computer, but I hope this webinar will be interesting. I work in Rome at the Oral Surgery Unit at the Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Sciences at Sapienza University, under the supervision of my mentor, Professor Giorgio Pompa. In this webinar, we will address the use of a novel porcine-derived acellular dermal matrix, the Mucoderm, in peri-implant soft tissue augmentation procedures and alveolar ridge reconstruction, with a particular focus on the aesthetic zone. So, let's talk about this matrix. The Mucoderm matrix was first introduced in the market in 2013 and is a porcine-derived acellular dermal matrix composed by natural types 1 and types 3 collagen fibers without artificial cross-linkings. And this is very important because, as investigated by the work of Professor Rotamel in 2014, which is the first publication about Mucoderm, in this work, an animal in vivo study, Professor Rotamel tried samples of this matrix in an animal model, and he found out that he studied the biodegradation pattern and how this matrix interacts with the surrounding tissues, and he found out that there were no foreign body reactions and all matrix had a perfect integration. So the Mucoderm was considered extremely safe. As we can see from this other study, authored by Professor Pabst and co-workers, they performed a synchrotron-based X-ray tomographic microscopy of the Mucoderm sample, and they evaluated the perfect structure of this matrix, highlighting how its internal structure and porosity allows, and three-dimensional structure allows for an excellent cell adherence and intercellular an excellent cell adherence. As you can see from this other study authored by Professor Pabst, they studied in vitro and in an animal in vivo the Mucoderm matrix, and they evaluated how the biodegradation pattern in evaluating in how much time does the matrix integrate in the surrounding tissue. What is the behavior of this matrix in the surrounding tissues? And as from their results, it can be stated that this matrix is fully integrated in the surrounding tissue and becomes connective tissues. So that there is a perfect integration of this matrix. But now let's start with the most important part of this webinar, with the clinical point of view. So let's see all the clinical applications of this matrix. As we know from the studies of Professor Cardaropoli, Linde, and Araujo, the alveolar process goes into an inevitable contraction after tooth extraction. This means that we have a loss either in hard tissues and soft tissues in height and diameter of the alveolar process, and with a different pattern based on the different region. We have different reabsorption pattern in the mandible or in the maxilla. Soft tissues can be interested sometimes because usually there is a loss of keratinized mucosa, and also we lost the gingival convexity. This is very important not only for aesthetic reasons but also for functional one, and can very much interact with the future implant prosthetic rehabilitation, as we will see in the second part of our webinar. So, as we can see from the work of Cardaropoli in 2003, he was the first in studying all the remodeling process of the alveolar process after a tooth extraction. We can see that at day 1, the cloth is comprised mainly of erythrocytes and platelets that are trapped in a network of fibrin. Between day 3 and day 5, the cloth disappears and it's the face of the granulation tissue. We have granulation tissue everywhere. And at day 7, it starts to appear also a very immature osteocyte membrane, and we have the formation of new blood vessels with various types of leukocytes and different kind of cells. At day 14, the marginal portion of the extraction socket is filled with newly formed bone. So we are talking about the very famous woven bone, which is a very immature form of trabecular bone. So what happened? That between day 14 and day 30, the extraction sockets starts, the woven bone starts growing from the apical side of the sockets and start to occupy the entire amount of the extraction sockets. So this is the phase of the very active process of remodeling. If we let the alveolus just heal for other days, we can see that between day 60 and day 90, so between 2 to 3 months after an extraction, 8 to 12 weeks, we have a newly formed hard tissue bridge in the top of the alveolus, and also we have the transformation of the woven bone in mature trabecular bone. Of course, this depends from the region in which that we are talking about. So, if we look at this very interesting work authored by Professor Chapuis and a group of Professor Buser from Bern University, they investigated all different factors related to bone tissue remodeling in the aesthetic zone. So they consider the anterior sector because it's one of the most important sectors. If we look at what our patients want, they want not only a functional result, but also an aesthetic one. So if we want to deliver them a perfect tailored result, we need to focus on and we need to understand which is the biological mechanism behind our treatment. So if we look at the study, what they basically did was just to evaluate via a CBCT scan exactly after the extraction and then after 8 weeks the various type of remodeling in the anterior zone. And they concluded they individuated the most important factor which is affecting the bone resorption, which is the fascial bone wall thickness. In fact, what they have seen is that if we have less than 1 millimeter of fascial bone wall thickness, we will have, after just 8 weeks, a reabsorption of the 62% of the former alveolar socket, which means a bone loss of more than 7.5 millimeters. If you look at the image of the picture, you can see the very important difference. In the top side of the picture, you can see a fascial bone wall thickness of less than 1 millimeter. At the bottom side, you can see a fascial bone wall thickness of larger than 1 millimeter. If we are lucky enough to have this situation for our patients, we can see that we will lose just 9% of the alveolar process, just 1.1 millimeter of bone loss. If you compare 1.1 millimeter with 7.5 millimeter, you can understand that the difference isn't tremendous. But you are wondering why is this guy talking about all these numbers? How this thing affects our daily practice? Well, this thing affects very much our daily practice because, as you know, the bundle bone is the lamellar bone, which is in strictly contact with the roots of our elements, and has a thickness of 0.2 to 0.5 millimeter, and is by nature a tooth-dependent structure. This means that when the tooth is extracted, the bundle bone is lost in the following weeks. But what is the rate of teeth with less than 1 millimeter of fascial bone wall thickness? How is this really important for us? Well, this is very important for us because more than 90% of teeth in the anterior sector have less than 1 millimeter of fascial bone wall thickness. And guess what? 50% of these teeth have less than 0.5 millimeter. Practically, they have all bundle bone. This means that in 90% of cases, 9 patients out of 10 that come to our dental clinics, if we extract a tooth of the anterior region, we will lose 62% of the alveolar process. And this, if we have done the extraction correctly. But if something has happened, if something passed, probably we will lose more. So this is very important because we need to understand what is the perfect implant placement timing what are all the variables that affect this bone remodeling. So the same authors asked these questions. Which factors influence the degree of bone reabsorption? Well, of course, the first one is the flapless tooth extraction. If we perform flapless extractions, we try to be as much conservative as possible. We will experience probably have a very good result. But other elements are, of course, the ridge preservation techniques. If you look at the literature, if you look at the courses, you have plenty of these techniques. But if you look at the literature, you will see that there are no systematic reviews, there is no scientific evidence on the real effectiveness of this technique, at least not yet, because there are a lot of materials and it's difficult to understand which works and which doesn't work. And we will try to do this in our webinar. Another factor affecting the degree of bone reabsorption is, of course, the immediate implant placement. For many years, for several years, there were plenty of authors considering that if you place an immediate implant, you won't experience a bone loss. But this is not true. As demonstrated by the study of Professor Sands since 2012, we have seen that you will experience a bone loss of a mean bone loss of 2.6 millimeters after the extraction. So let's see what happened. Well, if you look at the literature, if you want to try a flow chart, if you want to see something that will help you in your direct practice, maybe you can be interested in the work of Professor Jung. So Professor Jung tried to summarize all the techniques related to alveolar ridge reconstruction in one particular zone, the aesthetic zone. This is why, because of course it's the zone that has the most important interest for us and for our patients. So he tried to summarize all the possible and available techniques depending on the timing of the immediate dental implant placement and the timing and the need for soft tissue or hard tissue augmentation. Of course, the most important thing is the size of the bone defect. As we have saw before, if we have a facial bone wall thickness of less than 1 millimeter, we will have an enormous, a tremendous amount of bone loss. So we need to be prepared. We need to understand that even if we place an immediate implant with a very thin facial bone wall, we will lose all the facial wall of our implant. This means that for a high predictability of our treatment, we won't be very good. We won't have a very nice result because we have to secure our patients with treatment that goes for at least 10 to 15 years because this is what patients are asking for. This is what they see on Google. So we need to be very careful with the patients. So what is my guideline? As an ITI member, my guideline is the work summarized by Professor Buser and Professor Chen. The ITI, as you know, divides the immediate implants in 4 types. And this is very important because they not only do perform an academic classification, which is very abstract and not useful, but they do a practical one with clinical and practical guidelines. So this means that you will be guided. If you follow this classification, you will be able to deliver to your patients a successful result. Well, when is an immediate implant, as we imagine, that's said at the moment of tooth extraction? This is called type 1. If you look at the picture, you will see that the ITI recommends type 1 implant placement only if we have a thick facial bone wall. This what means 1 patient out of 10. This means that these guys don't recommend this kind of treatment for all the patients. So what is the most recommended treatment? What is the most common situation for our daily practices? Of course, type 2. If we wait 4 to 8 weeks after a tooth extraction, we will have a partial soft tissue healing that will help us for our future, for our implant placement, and we need to perform a counter-augmentation guide bone regeneration to allow us to obtain a sustainable result in the future. If we look At the picture, we will see how there is also a type-free immediate implant placement after 12 to 16 weeks. And in these cases, probably this treatment is indicated if we have very large periapical lesion, if we don't feel safe to perform to place a dental implant after just 6 to 8 weeks of healing. And if we want to be sure, maybe we can wait a little bit longer. But as you know, there are cases in which we need to wait more than 12 weeks, more than 16 weeks. We are talking about type 4. Type 4 is when we wait more than 6 months. And this is important because, as you can see, we can divide the type 4 implant placement into separate groups. If we have performed a socket sealing, an alveolar ridge reconstruction, a socket preservation procedure, or if we have not. So this means that we have performed like a massive GBR reconstruction and all this kind of stuff. Because it's important to understand that if we use a biomaterial, we need to understand that we have a certain delay, we have a certain time to expect, and each biomaterial has a different behavior. So now let's start with some clinical cases where we will show what are the applications of this novel porcine-derived membrane. So this is a very nice old lady coming to our attention of the university department. Her major complaint is that she is complaining about pain in the lateral left central incisor. She has very high levels of probing pocket depths. She has bleeding on probing. She has suppuration. We arrive at 13, so it's a very difficult situation, and also she has a grade 3 tooth mobility. The patient was an heavy smoker. She smoked more than 20 cigarettes per day for like 15 years. She didn't have a very good oral hygiene, so she was catched and taken in and put into a very strict oral hygiene protocol. Then she comes to our attention for an implant prosthetic treatment. She comes also, we are happy, we are lucky, and she comes with a CBCT. As you can see from the CBCT scan, this is the situation of the baseline. We have missed completely the fascial bone wall thickness. We are not speaking about 1 millimeter or less than 1 millimeter. We don't have any fascial bone wall. We have a very large periapical lesion that is interesting, not only the fascial aspect, but also the palatal aspect. As you can see, we have also a reabsorption of the palatal height. This means that the situation is critical. We have to act, and we have to act now, because as much as we wait, we won't have any native bone to support our implant. So, that said, who will go for an immediate implant placement? Well, I guess not me. Not me, because with this periapical lesion, with this situation, with this lack of residual bone, we will be forced to place our implant. We can try to place our implant immediately with a massive GPR, but we will not have a prosthetic guided implant, which is the most important thing. We are talking about a central incisor, so I think that we should be extremely careful. So what we do? We choose to do this time a flap extraction, not a flapless one. When I perform these cases, I usually design the flap before taking off the tooth because it's more accurate. When I try to be as conservative as possible, we are in the aesthetic zone. She is a lady. She has a very big smile. So I think that if we can avoid the release incisions, we will do a nice job. We at least try, and then there is always time for performing a release incision. So what we do after tooth extraction, you can see the amount of the defect after the extraction. Practically, we don't have residual bone. If you look at the picture, you can see where is the residual height. So what we need, this is where our mucoderm goes in. So we take our mucoderm, and then, as I will explain later, we simply hydrate for 10 minutes the mucoderm with a fresh blood sample collected directly from the site of the flap design. So we just need a very tiny needle, the tiniest needle that we have in the office, and we just collect, like we say, 1-2 milliliters of blood, and we mix it with fresh sterile saline solution, and we just leave the mucoderm rehydrating for 10 minutes. After this, what we do is taking our alloplastic material. We have chosen an alloplastic material, the Max Resorb, because we need a material not that allows a very fast turnover of the bone tissue. So what we do is that we are using an alloplastic material composed by 60% of hydroxyapatite and 40% of beta-tricalcium phosphate. So we take this material that has very different characteristics. In fact, the combination of the two different materials help us to obtain a rapid development of new vital bone, very high mechanical stability, and a controlled absorption. We need to calculate that we will need at least 6 months to get new bone, new native bone, because this will act as a scaffold for the formation of new bone, trabecular bone. So placing a mucoderm matrix in this case is very indicated, because we need to wait 6 months. We need a very strong matrix with a very important barrier effect, and also we need to maximize the amount of keratinized mucosa, because we are lacking keratinized mucosa, and we will need keratinized mucosa to have a very stable and practical result, because also from the peri-implant health point of view. So what we do is we basically, in this case, we just elevate as much as possible the palatal aspect of the flap, and we insert the matrix for at least 2 to 3 millimeters, just in order to get as much stable as possible. Then we just place our grafts, and then we just put the membrane. What we do is now we do some muscular release incision in the vestibular aspect of the flap, and we leave intentionally exposed around 20 to 30% of the membrane. This is very important, and this is another very important clinical advantage of this membrane. If you look at the picture, if you use another type of membrane, probably you would be scared, because you will understand, if you are a GBR practitioner, you are looking at the picture and saying, wow, now you will have a tremendous adhesions of them, and then a soft tissue collapse, and also a collapse of the graft, because the graft is not covered. Well, this is true for other types of membranes, but if you use a mucoderm matrix, you will be able to use a matrix that simulates the effect of a connective tissue graft. This means this procedure has the same effect of placing a connective tissue punch directly harvested from the palate. So if we see our patient 6 months later, this is the situation. As you can see, there is a very nice white of keratinized mucosa. Just remember the previous picture. Just remember the baseline situation with a complete loss of keratinized mucosa. Now look at the picture. You can see a very nice white of keratinized mucosa at all aspects. What about the X-ray control? Well, here we are. From the left side, you can see the situation of baseline. If you look at the middle one, it's that after 3 months, and then after 6 months. So you can see the perfect healing of the bone grafted, how we can recognize at least the borders of the graft tissues in the after 3 months, and then after 6 months the situation is completely different, and we can barely understand where is the graft and where is the native bone. As you can see, in the first picture, we have used as a provisional the crown of the tooth that we have extracted. But since the lady is not a very nice patient, she had suffered a trauma, and so we have to deliver a provisional Maryland bridge just to make sure that she won't have any contact, any pressure in the grafted area. We need to avoid as much as possible the pressure on the soft tissue and the graft that is covered, because we need to let our graft to mature without any pressure, any tension. So, after 6 months, we are finally at the moment of implant placement. As you can see from this picture on the left side of the screen, you can see the tremendous amount of keratinized mucosa that we have collected. So you can see, looking at the adjacent teeth, how the situation seems much better than the baseline. So how we have solved a very difficult situation. So what we do is we simply perform a crestal incision to place a mucoperiosteal flap with intrasulcular incisions of the adjacent teeth, and then we just raise our flap. This is the situation. You can see some particles from the graft that were not fully integrated. They are fibro-integrated, but there is enough evidence in the literature to support us that this won't be any problem. In fact, we have worked articles with more than 10 years of follow-up after GBR counter-augmentation procedure with alloplastic or xenoplastic xenograft, and you will see that this material will stay there forever, will not reabsorb, won't reabsorb, simply won't transform it it didn't transform it in native bone. So we place our implant. What about the density? Of course, we have reconstructed the implant. So we are placing an implant, we have reconstructed the bone. So we are placing the implant basically in grafted bone, in reconstructed bone. So the density won't be very good. It would be like a D3 of the Misch classification. So in these cases, what I do is I use a very short drilling protocol. I avoid to pass all drills, and I just stop one drill before my selected diameter. So if you look at the images, I have just stopped at the yellow drill, which is familiar for the Straumann users. We place our Straumann bone level tapered 4.1 12 millimeters implants, and as you can see, we have some grooves exposed. So what we should do now is give the implant a proper bone and a proper bone contour. So we need a counter-augmentation procedure. So what we do is now we take a different material. We take a bovine-derived graft, the Cerabon, and we mix the graft with native bone taken from drills. And then we cover everything with a pericardium membrane, a Jason membrane, just to leave the graft stabilizing and to obtain a perfect bone closure-free tension. This is the radiographic control. So you can see we were able to place this implant in a very critical situation. We waited 6 months, but we used those 6 months just to improve our possibilities to place a prosthetic guided implant. This is important because if we hadn't performed this socket preservation, which is more an alveolar ridge reconstruction, see the very large amount of the defect, then we wouldn't be able to place our implant. So the important thing to know is that we always need to use a material which allows us to obtain a very stable graft for 6 months. And in this case, the mucosa matrix was excellent. It had a very excellent comportment. If you look at the pictures, you can see the maturation of the keratinized tissue and how we have improved the width and also the thickness of the gingival tissue. So let's see another case. In this case, this time is a very young lady coming to our hospital because she has lost 8 weeks before her left lateral incisor. Her previous dentist told her just wait 6 months and then we will see, without a proper provisional restoration. So she was very frustrated by this. She wanted to solve her solution. And if you look at the situation, we have another time a critical situation. Look at the gingival convexity. We have completely lost the convexity. So we have a very high loss of bone and also of soft tissues, which is more evident than the other case. So what we do, we simply raise a flap and we place our narrow diameter implant. As you can see, we have a lot of grooves exposed, and also we have a very soft bone, very bad quality of bone. So what we do, we took our max resolve and we hypercorrect the defect. So look at the amount of bone that we have placed, and we sagomate, we design the mucoderm in order to don't touch the periodontal ligament, which is very important when you use this material. Don't touch, design the mucoderm in order to don't touch the periodontal ligaments of the adjacent teeth. We just place our mucoderm, and then another time we leave the graft intentionally exposed by around 20 to 30%. As you can see in the right side of the picture, this is the situation after I guess 12 weeks of healing, 12 weeks of submerged healing. We can see the situation after the placement of the healing collar, and you can look at how the peri-implant tunnel looks very good. So this is the most important picture. You can see the situation at baseline and after 1 year of prosthetic loading. So you can see how we were starting from a complete loss of gingival convexity, a very hard situation that could be very hard for us to restore this situation. Is a very aesthetic, is a very demanding challenge for us because it's a very aesthetic tooth in a very highly important region. So look at the gingival convexity of the after 1 year, and you can see how we were able to manage this case with the use of this membrane. How this membrane could allow us to gain more than 2.5 millimeters of gingival thickness, which is a very important result. So let's see now another case. This time we see a man. This is a man around 35 years old coming at our department because he has to get married, and her wife told him, well, I think that your left central incisor doesn't look so good. Well, the guy had an endodontic treatment and a crown at 18 years old for a previous trauma. So if you look at the periapical X-ray, you can see how we have a periapical defect. We have probably a granuloma, or at least is what we think. So the referral dentist proposed him to perform a endodontic retreatment, but the patient just wanted an immediate implant to extract the tooth, and to place an immediate implant because he doesn't have the time. He needs to get married, and he want to be sure. He has read on Google that implants never fail, so he just wants an implant. So the referral dentist referred the patients to us, very gentle from his side. So what we do is basically we extract the tooth in an automatic way. As you can see, look at the particular of the apex of the extracted tooth that may have caused the periapical lesion. So that's it. We will go for a flapless. Do you think we have the optimal solution, the optimal situation for a flapless immediate implant in the aesthetic zone? Well, I think that we don't have this situation. And you know why? Because when I was cleaning the alveolar process, I touched something, I feel something that wasn't fine to me. If I looked at the facial bone wall, there was something that seemed to me very strange, so I decided to raise a flap. I told the patient, I don't know if I will place an implant, just let me see. I will decide intraoperatorily. And then this is the situation when I open the flap. I raise the flap, and you can look at how big is this defect. We have a 7 millimeters diameter granuloma, but maybe we can say a size. So this is important. If we had managed to place an immediate implant, we had done a tremendous mistake. So we need to be very careful with our diagnosis. So what we do now, we have a flap open, we can place our implant, and we need to give the patient the best solution to allow him to get an implant prosthetic treatment. So if we leave this socket in this way, we probably won't be able to place a prosthetic guided implant. and this is a central incisor, and patient has very high expectations. So we need to be very careful. So what we do is basically we take from the box our Max Resolve, and we fill all the defects with Max Resolve. I had used more than two boxes of Max Resolve in this case, because the defect size was enormous. Then what we do is just we take our mucoderm and we design the mucoderm in order to don't get in contact with the periodontal ligament of the adjacent teeth, and then we simply, this way, we don't intentionally expose the flap. We simply perform our release incisions from the release of our vestibular release incisions, and then we suture the flap. If you look at the radiographic control after 3 months, seems that we have done a very good job. And so we will see probably in another webinar, or I don't know where, this final solution of this case. So now let's pass through the other topic of our mucoderm, peri-implants of tissue augmentation. So, do we really need more than 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa around dental implants? Well, I think that there is no, this is one of the hottest topics in dentistry. If you look at the articles, there are plenty of systematic reviews that are concluding all with the same phrase. There is not enough evidence to discuss the real clinical significance of keratinized mucosa around dental implants, which is practically a no sense for us because we are dental practitioners. We can tell this to our patients. We need to give them answers, concrete answers. So, even more, if we look at the literature, we can see that all these reviews about keratinized mucosa white and peri-implant tissues are biased. So if you look at this work by Moraschini and co-workers of 2017, they performed a quality assessment of all systematic reviews on the topic, and what did they conclude? That all studies were biased. No one study showed excellent methodological quality. This means that probably we need to conduct better studies to understand the real clinical significance of peri-implant keratinized mucosa white. But what happens? Happens that there is this work from Professor Thomas that is very useful for us that say that for peri-implant health, for improving peri-implant health, we need more than 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa around our implants. And for the first time, the consensus conferences of the European Association for Osseointegration 2015 and the Osteology Foundation in 2018 state that if we don't have these 2 millimeters, we need to perform some peri-implant augmentation procedures. This is the first time. So just a few months ago, this issue was solved. And recently, when I was studying for preparing this webinar, I read an article which is still on press, which is not yet available to all users, from the group of Professor Araujo, that is one of the only, I guess, the only prospective cohort study evaluating the effect of having more than 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa around our dental implants. So they have looked through the marginal bone loss levels, the tooth brushing discomfort, and also the plaque index for plaque accumulation. And what they have seen is that if we have more than 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa around our implants, we get better results. So this is, they say, what we in our daily practices, in our clinics, have seen from years, that if we have keratinized mucosa around the implants, we have a patient that doesn't complain about tooth brushing, we have a patient with a proper peri-implant tunnel. So, that said, it's very important to have this situation. But the question is, how can we obtain these 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa if we don't have enough? So we need to perform a surgical procedure. What is the gold standard? Well, if you look at the evidence, we have as gold standard the connective tissue graft, either subepithelial or associated with vestibuloplasty, or the free gingival graft. However, what happens? That in all cases, we have a certain degree of morbidity for donor site areas. This means that we have patients that are complaining about our procedures. I don't know you guys, but in my practice, I have plenty of patients that are saying to me, Doctor, I'm too scared. I won't be able to perform a palatal harvesting. I don't want a palatal harvesting because my wife, my cousin had one and he bleeded all night. I'm very scared. This is the clinical reality because a lot of patients refuse this type of treatment. But if we see at our implants, if we can't afford to lose these implants, to don't give a proper follow-up, a proper prognosis to these implants, because we weren't able to convince our patients to get a connective tissue graft. We need to find out an alternative. And we need to find that alternative also because what we have seen is that, first of all, we have a limited availability because we can, if we have multiple implants and there are plenty of patients, fully edentulous, that were treated and restored with full arch protocols, we simply don't have all the material sufficient. So another problem is the increase of surgical time. If you look at one work from Professor Cairo, you will see that he performed a randomized controlled clinical trial with the connective tissue graft versus a xenogenic membrane. And what he said is that there is an increase of more than 35 minutes in surgical time. 35 minutes is a lot in our daily practice, is really a lot. And also this is a very important variable of operator dependent variable because not everybody is able to perform a connective tissue harvesting from the palate in the same time at the same level. It's very difficult to, at least for beginners. So what we did in our university, me and my mentor, Professor Pompa, was to try to implement a research protocol on peri-implants of tissue augmentation at second stage implant surgery. We have chosen second stage implant surgery because based on the available literature, if we look at the articles available, we will see that the perfect timing is between the implant placement and the second stage surgery. So it's practically in every systematic reviews is written that there is no difference in conducting this treatment at the beginning when you place the implant or when you uncover the implant. So what we did is we basically linked it to the same anatomical area just to make sure that this material will be effective. So what we did was that we took just patients with less than 2 millimeters in keratinized mucosa, either in white or in gingival thickness, patients with a good oral hygiene, and we measured as primary outcome variables the keratinized mucosa white and the gingival thickness, and as secondary variables the marginal bone loss, the PPD levels, the implant success and survival, the bleeding on probing, and the plaque index. Why did we take also the marginal bone level? Because as now is published by the group of Professor Araujo and how was suggested by Dr. Linkevicius a few years ago, it might be that if we have a very nice 2 millimeters of keratinized mucosa around our implants, we will experience a smaller marginal bone loss. So, if you can see, as you can see in one of these cases, this is the typical presentation of our patients. We have a missing second premolar on the right side. We have a negative concavity. As you can see, we have completely lost the gingival convexity. So we raise our mucoperiosteal full thickness flap and we just place our Straumann bone level tapered implant. As you can see, we just check the angulation and then we place our implant. We check the perfect placement of our implant in different ways. And as you can see, this is a very interesting picture because as you can see the profile of the negative concavity. As you can see, there is a bone defect, but you can see that there are more than 2 millimeters between the shoulder of the implant, the margin of the implant, and the facial bone wall thickness. This means that we don't have to perform a GBR procedure. Why? We will do an overtreatment. So what we do is we simply close our flap. Then we take our membrane. As I showed you before, this is the best way to get your membrane hydrate. If you look at the article by Professor Casai in 2015, you will see that the professor studied the different ways to hydrate the mucoderm matrix, the different properties that have connected with these ways. And what he saw that was that if you put this matrix membrane, this mucoderm membrane in fresh blood sample collected directly from the site of the flap incision with a small needle for around 8 to 10 minutes, you will maximize the porosity, the structure of the membrane, and the membrane will be more able to transform in connective tissue. So what we did was we left the membrane for 10 minutes and then we performed a U-shape incision, and then we modeled our mucoderm just as a connective tissue graft, and then we place this membrane. In these cases, we perform a full thickness flap on the crestal aspect and a partial thickness flap on the vestibular aspect. It's important to notice that we didn't suture the membrane. This is a very stable membrane. It's very much easier if you don't suture the membrane, because if you have cut the membrane in a nice way, you won't need to suture the membrane. So we can see the situation at 10 days, suture removal. Look at the gingival thickness. Look at the gingival contour. Look at the convexity. Seems better than the adjacent teeth. Like we have hypercorrected the defect. Then the situation of 30 days seems stable. So what we do is that we deliver the temporary and then the final processes, and then the patient came after 6 months. If you look at the picture on the left side, you will see how we have experienced like a certain degree of shrinkage from the previous one, but this is normal and is consistent with previous publication. The most important thing is that we didn't experience a further contraction in the interval between 6 to 12 months, and this is very important. And also we can see the maturation of the tissues, the adaptation of the papillas. So the situation from the soft tissue point of view looks very good. From the prosthetic point of view, doesn't look so good because we are in a hospital, so we have processes, hospital processes, so this could be better. But look at the occlusal aspect at 6 to 12 months and see how the situation is not changed and how we have a perfect profile of the gingival tissues. So now we perform also the X-ray control after 1 year, and you can see that we didn't experience any marginal bone loss. Look at our results. Look at the results of our study that were published in Biomed Research International. So you can see that we have a small sample of 12 patients because it was a pilot study just to test the mechanism of working of this material. But very important, look at the gingival thickness. You will see that at 1 month we have 5.23 millimeters of gingival thickness. We are talking about mean values. And then after 1 year, 4.12. This means that we had from this baseline 1.35 millimeters, again a mean gain of 2.8 millimeters at close to 3 millimeters. This is a very impressive number. And also for the keratinized mucosa white, which is a consequence of the augmentation of the gingival thickness. As for the secondary variables, you can see that there is nothing particular to tell. like we have a very low rate of marginal bone loss, so the situation is pretty good. Of course, if we talk about marginal bone loss, implant success and survival, we are talking about 1 year follow-up, which is nothing. But the very important thing is that we are talking about a 12 months follow-up for peri-implant soft tissue augmentation. Look at the articles in literature, and you will see that you will have works from the group of Professor Sands, from the Professor Cairo. All these works have a 3 to 6 months follow-up. There is just one work from Schmidt and co-workers in 2016 with a 5 years follow-up, but is a completely different procedure, a vestibuloplasty associated with a double layer of xenogenic membrane in the mandibular overtensions. This means that this is one of the very few studies with 1 year follow-up and 1 year measurements of gingival thickness and keratinized mucosa white. So this is another case. We can see the baseline situation. This is a patient presenting at our department with a very bad situation. He has a very terrible prosthetic rehabilitation. He experienced many problems, so he decided to cut this rehabilitation, place an implant in the missing first premolar, and then to restore completely the other elements. So what we can see is the baseline situation. Look at the second premolar. Look at where is the cervical decay, which is impossible, barely impossible to treat in this situation. So what we did is that we combine the clinical advantages of Mucoderm with crown lengthening in the same surgical procedure, because we didn't want to submit patient to 2 surgical procedures at, I guess, a very small difference of time. So if you see, this is the situation at implant uncovering. We need to perform a flap, so at this time what we do is we simply do a U-shaped incision on the crestal aspect, and then we extend the incision, performing a crown lengthening on the second premolar. As you can see, we had to consume at least 2 millimeters of bone because the cervical margin was very high. So now we see the situation after the proper healing. You can see the gingival contour after the insertion of Mucoderm. This is at suture removal after 10 days. And then look after the first series of provisional were delivered to the patient. You can admire the extent, the white of the keratinized mucosa and the thickness of the tissue. Then you can see also the provisional for the implant crown. But this is the most important picture. This is the peri-implant tunnel after more than 1 year of prosthetic rehabilitation. So look at the peri-implant sulcus, look at the neoangiogenesis and all these very new small blood vessels around our implant. Those are all signs of implant stability. Those are all signs of implant health, and we have obtained all this with a xenogenic membrane. Look at the picture, you will see, how we have a perfect healing of the tissues and how we can see where is the inserted graft. If you compare the gingival contour, the small vessels of the implant with the one of the natural tooth, you will see that the implant has a very outstanding result, and this only with a Mucoderm matrix. So if you look at this is the last case. If you look at this other case, you will see another excellent job done by the Mucoderm matrix. In this case, an implant was placed. To place the implant in the proper prosthetic position, you can see a transparency of the coronal growth of our implant. So if we leave the implant in this way, if we just restore the implant, if we don't do nothing, we will probably have peri-implantitis or peri-implant mucositis. We will have a certain degree of sufferance from the implant because the loading will lead to further reabsorption of the facial bone wall that could lead to some peri-implant diseases. So what we do, we need to uncover the implant. We have a lack of keratinized mucosa, so we perform this time a full thickness flap. We raise a full thickness flap and we place our mucoderm. We hydrate the mucoderm, and in the mix of saline solution and blood sample taken from the patient, as you can see, we design. You need to be very careful in designing the membrane. Then we place our membrane at the full thickness on the vestibular aspect without suturing. And then we just suture the flap. You don't need release incision because the flap will cover, because you have a soft tissue defect that will be covered up by the mucoderm matrix, and then the flap will go up by itself. So we just place the normal 6-0 Vicryl sutures, and then we perform this time a digital impression. So look at the situation. Look at the situation around the scan abutment after 3 weeks. This is 3 weeks after of healing after the procedure. Look at this picture and see how we have completely changed the gingival thickness, how this situation is completely different from the previous one. And if you have any doubts about the use of this membrane, just look at these images and you will have the complete case as soon as we perform the prosthetic rehabilitation. We performed also this measurement, this digital measurement, to let us understand on a complete point of view what is the amount of keratinized tissue that we have gained with this membrane. So you can see on the left side the situation at baseline before implant uncovering, and then you can see the situation while performing the impression. Look at the gingival convexity before and after, and then you can understand what a tremendous gain of keratinized tissue we can obtain without palate harvesting with a simple and effective procedure that takes no more than 20 minutes and is very much less dependent by the surgeon, because it's much easier. You just need to hydrate well the mucoderm and to perform a U-shaped slightly palatal incision. So it's quite easy. So concluding our webinar, then we can say that according to our results, by placing a mucoderm membrane, the keratinized tissue height and thickness can be augmented with a shrinkage consistent with previous publication. But as I want to point out, the other publications refer to a follow-up period of 3 to 6 months. This is a 1-year follow-up. It's nothing, but it's a very concrete data. So what we will want to do is that we want to perform a randomized controlled clinical trial comparing the use of mucoderm with the connective tissue graft in order to be able to fully understand the clinical efficacy of this procedure. But from our pilot study results, from our clinical results in the daily practice, well, this membrane allows us to obtain amazing results, as you can see from also in the static zone. Look at this case and look from the baseline to the final situation after more than 1 year, this time in combination with MaxResorb. So we obtained a complete substitution of the bone graft and a perfect integration of the soft tissue graft. And more than anything, we have passed from this situation on the left side to this situation of health, peri-implant, health and stability on the right side. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Then let's see if we have any questions. Hello, in all the cases you describe, what bone substitutes do you use? I mean, the actual product name. Well, if you look at the first cases in the first part of the presentation, I have used a MaxResorb in combination with the mucoderm, which means alloplastic material made by 60% hydroxyapatite and 40% beta-tricalcium phosphate. So MaxResorb, when you need to perform a barrel ridge reconstruction, you need to leave your graft for at least 6 months, or Cerabond, bovine-derived xenograft when you need a GBR, a counter-augmentation GBR, either in combination with a JSON membrane or a mucoderm membrane. So as for the thanks, Doctor. In most cases, you show mucoderm used directly with the bone graft. My question is, are there certain cases where the bone should be covered first by a barrier membrane like JSON or Core Protect, then mucoderm on the top of the JSON? Well, this is a possibility. In my practice, in my experience, if you place the mucoderm, you are fine with the mucoderms, because if you place the mucoderm, means that you have limited amount of keratinized mucosa available. So this means that if you need to create another keratinized mucosa, it's better to use just the mucoderm. Then, if you have the first case, when you perform the implant placement later, if you experience if you need to perform a GBR counter-augmentation procedure, then you can use a JSON membrane or a Core Protect membrane, which is very useful as well, with a different bone substitute. But if you just need to obtain a proper amount of keratinized mucosa to allow you to have a prosthetically guided implant placement with a sustainable peri-implant health over the time, you could use only mucoderm. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody for having joined me in this live webinar, and I send you all my greetings from, wait, there is another question. Allora, the literature shows that in most cases where ridge preservation was done, we still need to graft at implant placement. And this is correct because it's what I have shown you before. Why not just wait for healing and graft onset implant placement? Well, because if you look at a lot of cases, like look at the first case, the one of the old lady with the left central incisor, then what you see there is that if you look at the CBCT scan, not in my words, look at the CBCT, and then you will see that if we don't place any graft, we won't be able to place an implant later, because we have bone remodeling, which is very unfavorable to us, because if you see if you have a complete loss of the facial bone wall thickness with also large periapical lesion interesting the buccal aspect of the flap, you can't just degranulate and clean the alveolar process and then leave the process how it is, because you won't be able for the bone remodeling to place an implant. So yes, sometimes you can't do differently. What suture material do you use when placing mucoderm exposed? Well, just common vital sutures. I prefer to use those kind of sutures when I leave intentionally exposed mucoderm. If not, you can use nylon or whatever is best in your hands. Could you repeat why we have to be careful to not touch the periodontal ligament of the adjacent tooth? Why is the reason? Well, if you look at the literature, you will see that when we are performing a guided tissue regeneration, a bone and soft tissue regeneration in a GBR procedure in these cases, and we place a membrane, we should be very careful to not place the membrane in contact with the periodontal ligament of the adjacent teeth. And this is because it could be interested by some inflammatory process that could lead to a faster reabsorption of the membrane. Mucoderm, of course, can be exposed. I have experience in exposing at around 30% of the matrix. I think that if you instruct the patients to rinse twice a day with chlorhexidine 0.12 for 2 times a day for 1 minute for 10 to 14 days, depending on the cases, then you won't have much problems. The important thing is that you leave the 70% of the mucoderm covered, and then you avoid in all ways pressure on the graft, because if you avoid the graft, you will be able to obtain a good result. How deep do you insert the buccal on the buccal side? Well, if you look at the first case, you can see that I used this technique just for this case because I didn't have the fascial bone wall. So this means that I was forced to use the buccal wall to stabilize my graft. So I think that you should insert your graft at least 3 millimeters. It's clear that the more you insert the material, the more stable it gets. So probably it's better if the more than you can is the best answer. Thank you for all your very interesting questions. Well, if there are any further questions, I don't know what dental tribune. I mean, behind the implant apex on the defect apical side. I mean, behind the implant apex. Ah, well, okay, in the other side. Okay, no. Well, you can just go like if you see at the case of the left lateral incisor, I placed the implant, but the implant was practically fully covered by the native bone. So if you look, we have just a portion of coronal growths exposed. If you place an immediate implant with a fenestration adhesions of the bone tissue, usually you experience a loss of bone in the first coronal growth of the implant. This means that from the apical side you have the bone covering the defect. But if you are saying that we have an apical defect on the apex of the implant, well, you should go at least 2 millimeters, at 2 millimeters down. This would be nice because you need the mucoderm needs to rely to the proper native bone tissue. A lot of very nice questions from different colleagues. So thank you so much for your interest. I thank you for having seen my webinar, and I hope this was interesting to you guys. I think that the webinar will stay on the Botiss webinar page, so you can see the webinar as many times as you want. If you have any questions, you can contact me at my email address, which is piero.papi uniroma1 UNEROMA.ET. I have shown my email address on the last yeah, it's better if I type. Wait, if I can type, I'll type. Well, seems that I can. Okay. So this is my email address. I just replied to the comment from Ines Sinman. Okay. Thank you, webinar support, for your help. Okay, so if you don't have any further questions, I would like to thank you again, Botiss and Dental Tribune, for the technical support, and I hope that you have liked my webinar. So see you, and best regards from Rome. Bye. Thank you.